Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Alcandros Capital Management educational podcast. Today's will be a short one. We're going to look at the overall global stock exchanges. So we'll go through sort of a short list of them. Maybe go into a little bit of, not a lot of detail, but we'll just kind of do a quick overview of all the stock exchanges out there, where they are. Sort of roughly the number of kind of companies they are, or there are in each one, that sort of thing. So it's not very well known, but there are actually a lot more stock exchanges out there than sort of the typical ones people will know. Most people will know the typical U.S. stock exchanges like the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ. Of course, there's also the London Stock Exchange. What's the one in Japan? I forget. The one in Japan, I think it's not the Nikkei. I think it's the Nikkei actually. I always get that confused. But there's one in Japan that's quite well known. I shouldn't really know this, but I don't trade on the stock exchange, the Japanese one, so I guess I can be forgiven for that. I'm just trying to think what other one is sort of well known. Those are sort of your main ones. I think Australia obviously has one. I'm not sure it's as well known as the others, but the more famous ones are the ones in the U.S., Japan, London. I guess there's some other ones that are sort of secondarily, like some sort of secondary ones that are somewhat known about, maybe more towards the somewhat seasoned investor. But someone who wouldn't know anything about the stock exchange or the stock market, or is a novice to trading, probably wouldn't realize there's actually several dozen stock exchanges across the globe. Probably about 3 dozen stock exchanges. That's kind of a rough estimate. I'm kind of going by memory here, but there are actually that many. A lot of countries have their own stock exchange, and they can be traded on. We'll go through a sort of a list of the basic ones, of course. So obviously you got the New York Stock Exchange, you got the NASDAQ, the New York Stock Exchange is worth more at 22 billion compared to the NASDAQ. It's not even half its value at 10. You've got the Japan Exchange Group. That's only worth half as much as the NASDAQ. Then you have one in Shanghai and one in Shenzhen. So China has 2, which some people may not know about. And also India has 2, as you can see listed here. However, that's incorrect. It shows 2 at Mumbai. Okay, so they've got it, yeah. So they're both in Mumbai, but they have different names. You've got the Bombay Stock Exchange and the National Stock Exchange. So some people might not know that India has 2, but India does have 2. It makes sense for India and China to have 2 because, both countries have over 1 billion people. Hong Kong has its own. It may not be for long, though, but if the political situation changes. But most likely, I think Hong Kong will probably keep its exchange there. There's also the Euronext. Now the Euronext covers how am I going to describe this? So the Euronext has companies from a number of different countries, such as the Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland, Portugal, Norway, and France. So Amsterdam, Brussels, Dublin, Lisbon, Oslo, Paris all have a Euronext exchange. So it's all part of the Euronext. It's all part of the one exchange, but they're in different places, in different countries. London and Milan. Now I didn't know this, but apparently the London Stock Exchange also includes companies from Milan as well. So I didn't realize that because I was under the impression that Milan had its own stock exchange. So even I learned something by doing this podcast. Of course, Canada has its one and only in Toronto. Australia has its own in Sydney. I didn't think it was going to be listed here, but New Zealand actually has its own as well in Auckland. So Sydney and Australia and New Zealand both have separate stock exchanges. But you would never guess a country like New Zealand, I think New Zealand is probably about 5 million people, give or take, has its own stock exchange. So a very small country, but it has its own. Germany, of course, has its own, the Deutsche Börse. Switzerland, of course, has its own in Zurich, based in Zurich, Korea. Also has a stock exchange in Seoul, Busan. And then you've got a whole bunch of Scandinavian countries that have their own as well. Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Iceland has their own. Armenia has their own. Taiwan does. And so does Brazil, South Africa, and Spain. Now, not listed here are many other countries as well. Starting with Asia, Thailand is not listed in there, but Thailand does have its own stock exchange. I'm not sure about some of the other Southeast Asian countries, but Thailand definitely does have its own, and that's not one that's quite well known at all or listed. If you go more towards the Middle East, you will find that there is a small stock exchange in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia does have its own. It's not a very big exchange. I believe there's only about a dozen companies that are traded on the Saudi stock exchange, but it does have its own. Russia has its own in Moscow. The MCX, I believe, is the short abbreviation. So Russia does as well. Greece has its own as well. Again, that's not listed here. Just trying to think of some other. Poland has its own as well. Poland and Greece, lesser known ones, but they do have their own stock exchanges. I'm sure there's probably some other countries that I have either forgotten or overlooked that may have their own in Europe or Asia, but those are some other mentionable countries that aren't mentioned or well known at all. I think in Africa, apart from South Africa, I don't recall any other exchanges in Africa. Could be wrong. There may be some in North Africa, maybe in Egypt, but nothing rings a bell there. That leaves us with North America. There is one in Mexico, which is not listed here, so Mexico has its own. Central South America, other than Brazil, I can't think of any other country, so there may be one there as well. If anybody does know any other ones that I haven't listed, please feel free to contact me. But that's and let me know. But that's kind of just a general overview of the different stock exchanges. I don't think we'll go into too much more detail about the capitalizations when they open, that sort of thing. What I plan to do is over time start what I'll do with the educational podcast is over time I will cover each exchange in detail, and I'll go through those details in those podcasts. But for this one, I just wanted to give you a general overview of the different exchanges that are out there in all the different countries, and basically just give you an overview about that and not much more. So, well, I think end the podcast there. So on behalf of Alkindros Capital Management, this is Konstantin Kai Alkindros signing out. Thanks for listening.